Hi, everyone. This is Alexandra from Hear Me Roar, and welcome to Cacao Talk. Today is episode 7, and I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite topics in the world, which is ayahuasca. But beforehand, let's go ahead and have some cacao. Mm-mm-mm. Today, I went simple again. It's just the cacao and some date syrup, which is filling the need and the desire for the chocolate. Also because, well, I'll go on my story. I'll start telling the story, and then another reasoning why I decided to do the cacao this way will come up. So I wanted to talk about my 5 ayahuasca ceremonies that I did last October. I cannot believe in about a month will be 1 year since I went and had one of the most life-changing experiences of my entire life. So last year, right around August of last year, I got introduced to someone who hosts and facilitates the ayahuasca ceremonies down in Peru. And I connected with this individual, and immediately, I knew that based on what was going around in my life at that time, that this was the next step. There was such an alignment. There was such a hell yes, like this is what you are meant to experience next, to be an important part of my healing journey, right? So sometime in August of last year, I connected with this individual, and I decided that I was going to go to Peru, and I wanted to do the ceremonies on my own. Ceremonies can be done individually or, in a small group, but I really felt that I wanted to do the ceremonies on my own with the facilitator. And in the end, I actually did have an opportunity to do one of the last ones in a group setting, but I'll go more into that in detail in a little bit. So I get to Peru. I decided to go there for 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, I committed myself to do 5 ayahuasca ceremonies. So I did one ceremony every other day that I was in the jungle. And then at the same time, I actually did another master plant that is called Ajo Sacha. And so that I drank every day for 2 days. And then I had an ayahuasca ceremony every other day. 4 of my ceremonies were done in the evening, and 1 ceremony was done during the day. Now, I was told by the facilitator that there are different reasons and different energies that come in by doing a night ceremony versus doing a day ceremony, and I did feel those differences. So if you were considering, okay, I guess this is the main point too of the topic why I want to share this. If you're considering an ayahuasca journey, there are a few things that I feel are very, very important to be mindful of. The first is where you're going to do these ceremonies, right? I feel like probably a lot of you that I am very particular about who holds space for me, because that will determine how relaxed and how comfortable and safe I feel to really allow myself to give myself over to the journey, right? And I hadn't heard very much about ayahuasca prior to this. I just knew that it was an intense experience, an intense master plan, and it definitely would bring up very heavy emotions, but also very euphoric experiences and energies, right? And so I wanted to make sure that the environment, the container that was being held and created for me was going to be very nurturing and very supportive, which it was. The second thing, obviously, to consider is setting intention. And I tell this to everybody who does ceremony, whether it's, own little personal ceremony at home with cacao, or you go to a cacao event or a plant ceremony event, or a healing, sound healing, or any sort of healing or group gathering. It's so important that an intention is set, because that intention really is the vibration, right? So first you have the container created for you. Now you're going in and said, okay, great. Now I have a safe, wonderful, beautiful container. What is the vibration? What is the energy, right? What is the goal basically of me doing this, And like many plant medicines and just other recreational medicinal plants out there, There can be different reasons why someone takes something, right? Whether it's going to be just to have fun, recreational, or medicinal, or even spiritual. There's different, I really do feel that there's different effects and different experiences you have with the plant medicine, right? Now, I really don't see Aya, which is short for ayahuasca, being one of those that we take on a recreational basis just because she kicks your butt. She's this beautiful, beautiful, like, she's a balance of like tough love meets unconditional love, right? It's really, really challenging sometimes to explain what her energy feels like. But it ends up being the most balanced thing that I feel like that is what I needed, and what if it's something that calls you that you need, right? So that would definitely be the second thing, is the setting the intention. And also just, like what you do before and after going into these ceremonies, right? So typically in most Aya ceremonies, there is what we call, or they call, a dieta. And a dieta is just basically a week long, it's not just with food, it's also with your energy and where your focus is and where you're spending your time. But it's a 7-day container or lifestyle that you start creating, where you become even more mindful of the foods that you're consuming, the energy you're consuming, the media that you're consuming, because you really want to be in alignment physically and have the endurance to go through a ceremony. So there is a dieta to follow prior to the ceremony itself. That's typically 7 days. And then if you're going to do something like me, which is the 5 ceremonies pretty much back to back, which, trust me, it is not common. It is done, but it's not, it's not something that most people do. There is a dieta to follow during that. And so you want to make sure that where you are going to do this, that they are able to provide and they're aware of this, and hopefully, actually, that the facilitator is able to create that for you as well. And then just giving yourself time to really integrate, to really journal, to really reflect on what you gather from the ceremonies, right? So I'll go through what an evening ceremony was like for me. So right around well, not sunset, actually a little bit about past sunset, we, would get together, and I was specifically in a little palapa outside, because that way I could really hear the natural sounds of the jungle around me and of nature, right? And then we would, set a little altar, set the intention. I typically every day, every time I was going to do a ceremony, would either pose a question or set an intention. So like my question was an intention, like something I wanted to get clarity on, something I wanted to get guidance, something I wanted to heal or let go. So I typically had anywhere from 1 to 3 things that would come up right before the ceremony, and we would set that intention. And then the ayahuasca was given to me. I would take a dose of it. And it typically took about, 30 to 40 minutes for me to start feeling something, right? And what I mean by, you really do start feeling something. You start feeling even more of a sensitivity in your body. You start feeling more sensitivity in one of your senses. One of the craziest things, I didn't know this, but in the kitchen, which was not, it wasn't next to us. It was down on the other side of the property where I was doing the ceremonies. In the kitchen, I didn't know that a very light soup had been prepared for me for after the ceremony if I needed a little bit more nourishment. I didn't know, and it had already been prepped and cooked, and it was just sitting there. But during the ceremony, I can actually smell all the ingredients that were inside of this soup, and this soup was like quite a bit away from me. It wasn't like right next to me or anything, and so you start noticing your senses becoming a little bit more sensitive. I would notice just how I felt, how I was connecting to the energy around me. I actually will show you in this cup, if you see these little images, to me and to some people who expressed this to me when I was in Peru. This is kind of the energy of like a representation of Aya. You'll see this a lot in the tapestry and pottery, because Aya really is this energy that at least I feel and interpret it as it's the energy right outside, around us and outside of us. So like, here's my cup. You can see one of my plants over here, and then there's just other things around me. And Aya is this, this network of energy that's weaved into life like this that connects all of us, even though I'm not physically touching this plant right now or the things around me, So you really start feeling a sensitivity to that. Now, one of the biggest questions I get asked two questions actually, when I tell people that I didn't have done ayahuasca ceremonies. The first is purging. You always get asked the question of like, how was the purging? Because there is purging that happens. So I will be very frank and honest with you. My first ayahuasca ceremony was literally 6 hours of purging. And it was a variety of styles of purging, from, feeling like I had a fever, to shivers, to, shaking, like I was like shaking like this, but I was also like, my body was like trembling, which actually is a great way to release trapped traumas. There was a lot of like crying, there was laughter, there was burping, there was sneezing, there was vomiting, and there definitely was some upset stomach, like diarrhea. Like there was all of those things, right? And so not everyone experiences all of these things at the same time. Like that is not typical. That's just what my body, my energy decided to go through in the first experience I had. But because I had set the intent that I was ready to purge, and I was like, however it needs to happen, I am open and willing. So that's what happened to me. That's why I say intention is extremely important. But yeah, there is purging that's done in different ways. And purging just really means the ability to release the energy in you, so that Aya can continue going into your energy, into your field, into your body. The energy of Aya is very much like a serpent. So when I would first drink her, I would start feeling her energy going into my body. And then if there was like a stuck energy, like maybe let's say like on my right side or my right shoulder, I was feeling some heaviness there and she couldn't move through, then it was either, okay, we work on that. And sometimes I would get visuals and images, like I was doing some deep, like somatic work, like things would come up, feelings and emotions come up, and I would feel those emotions. I would go through emotions of euphoria, of anger, of resentment, of sadness, of appreciation, of unconditional love. Like there was something there that needed to be expressed. And so she would stop there, her energy would stop there and be like, here, pay attention here, focus here, release this here. This is what's needed to be expressed or let go of or transmuted. And then as I would do that, then I would feel her going further down into my body, so that's just this very like serpent-like energy. And if you resist her, you can. I mean, it's also interesting or somewhat challenging to explain, because you're kind of like in control and you're not in control. Like, if I felt this anger coming up, if I didn't want to feel it, there is a sense of like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. Now, there's a whole other experience that you have with that, right? There's a whole, I don't want to say consequence, but there is, then your experience you're going to have is very different if there's a lot of resistance towards that anger versus if there's an expression of that anger, right? So that first ayahuasca ceremony was extremely intense for me. I have heard from others, and it's a spectrum, but some that it is very intense, some that are, somewhat in the middle, and some that are just like, I didn't feel anything, I have heard those stories of that full spectrum. By the second ceremony, there wasn't as much purging. I actually don't think I purged in the rest of my ceremonies. Now, there were moments where I felt a little bit of nausea, and I was open and I would allow myself, if I needed to purge, I set the intention that I will, but there physically wasn't that type of purging. I should correct myself. Let me backtrack. I didn't have vomiting as a purging. I did have other styles of purging in my other ceremonies for sure. Definitely lots of tears in the rest of the ceremonies, tears of grief and sadness, but also tears of love and appreciation. I personally, tears are my way of releasing and expressing all emotions. I don't just cry when I'm sad. I cry pretty much in every emotion, So for me, tears are a big thing. I don't know why, and this might be TMI, but burping was a big one for me. Like every time I felt nauseous or every time like I came up on a roadblock. Like the burping was so big for me. And at first it was kind of embarrassing, but I'm like, what am I embarrassed about? First of all, I'm by myself. And second of all, like burping is better than vomiting. I mean, at least that's what I would say, right? And then the trembling was a big thing for me. And even now to this day, when I do some very heavy sessions with myself, or I have someone else hold space for me, or I do like a static dance movement and stuff, that shaking of the body is, for me personally, I have discovered, is a beautiful way for me to process and express through emotions, right? My third ceremony was during the day. I had the great opportunity. There was a river running through the property where I was staying, and I had the opportunity to do my ceremony pretty much like literally in the river on day 3. Like we just went out there. The river was really low. There was all these natural rocks and trees, and I did ceremony. And it was very different because the evening ceremonies, I feel, are very like, you really go within, and it's more of, I always get these words mixed up, but it's very like introspective, very deeply into that. Where the day ceremony, I guess, because I could see things around me and I was connecting more to the trees, to the waters. At one point I had a little bee come to me and a little fly, and I was like literally moving my fingers, and this little fly is like moving with me, and we were dancing together. So it was more of like how I'm connected to the world around me. Now I did have those moments when I was in the evening ceremonies, but it was more like those moments were taking me into understanding like the deep wounds and stuff, within me. And then I would see like different, like I would become, I tell people, this is literally what happened. I would become the eye of a frog, or I would become the little, on a leaf where you have the little stick and then it has the little, supporting structure. I was that part of a leaf. At one point I was part of the network of Aya and how she connects with everybody. At one point, one of the reasons I went there was to get over, like I mentioned before, I processed what I call 2 broken hearts in the same year. And at one point, I became the soul of one of the individuals whom I was still holding a little of anger and resentment towards, and it was just so beautiful because it brought so much like embodiment of that we are all one. We are all connected. We are all a reflection of each other. We all come from the same source. And it was just such a beautiful way to really experience and process and own and transmute and lean into the emotions that were needed, and on the full spectrum of what we call good and bad, in order for me to shed all of those layers, all of those expectations, all of those attachments to those things, so I could have more freedom to step forward more into who I authentically am. And that's really the biggest thing that I got from these ceremonies. So the 4th ceremony was back in the evening. And then the 5th ceremony, I had the opportunity to go ahead and do it with a group. The facilitator had some friends that were in town, and, they had asked like, hey, what are you doing? And I had told them that she was in the jungle with me doing ceremony. And they had asked if I would be comfortable with them coming and joining in that 5th ceremony, kind of also like as a celebration. They all had beautiful talents. Like some of them could sing. One of the women played a violin. The other one did chanting. The other one had drums. Another person had a flute. Like everyone had such like musical talents and gifts. And I'm like, oh my God, this would be beautiful. This would be a great way to do a celebration and ceremony with Aya. So they came and, we all got together. In the first hour or so, it was pretty quiet, and the facilitator was using some, shamanic tools, scents and sounds to kind of help us, that Aya to start getting into our bodies and for us to start embodying her more. But then once we were all connected and once we were all in that network, everyone would be inspired to go ahead and like channel her energy through their voice, through their instrument. And for me is when I discovered that movement was so important. I could literally see as they sang, as they chanted, as they played the instruments, I could see the energy of these things. And with my hands, I was able to pull from it and almost use what I call alchemy to create these waves or these balls of energy and the movement of all of that. And so that was the gift that I got to bring and discover of myself. Now, I can go on for days. Remember, I did 5 ceremonies. I can go on for days on this topic, but I at least wanted to just share a snippet of my experience in case anyone is ever interested in doing plant ceremony. It's definitely something that can be very beneficial, but there are considerations to make sure. First of all, you got to make sure that if you are on any medications or certain things are going on in your life, find a facilitator and or a doctor that can help you navigate through those things, because there are some things that do counteract with the Aya, even though it is something natural. There are potentials for that, so you definitely need to consider that. The second is to make sure that the container that's being created for you, that the location is a space that can really hold that energy, and it will provide you the support, not just during the ceremony, but like I mentioned, the post, which is guiding you through the dieta. And then if you're going to do more than one ceremony, that you're guided, throughout what you can consume, continuing the dieta, if you do multiple days and multiple rounds of the Aya. And then the next is the intention, making sure that you're very clear of why you are doing ceremony with a plant, ceremonial plant, any ceremonial plant. It is so important to be very, very clear on why you are inspired and why you are ready to commune with this plant, because it is a powerful energy, and it will take you on that journey. It may just not look like the way you anticipated, but the intention is important. And of course, the post, making sure that after your ceremony or ceremonies, that you give yourself time to really integrate. It took me I will honestly say about 3 months to really feel like I had gotten a good grasp of everything that had happened, because so much had come out of me. I had taken a brand new notebook, a journal, and I filled every single page of that while I was in that jungle for 10 days. So I just at least wanted to share that. I wanted to share some of my experiences and, some of my tips, if it's something you want to do. Again, if you have any questions or comments or topics for the future, feel free to comment below. You can also subscribe. Once I finish the Cacao Talks at the end of this month, I'm going to start adding other videos of other content and information. I think I will definitely continue with Cacao Talk, but probably not just every day, because there's other things that are coming in that I want to share with you guys, that is going to be absolutely life-changing. So thank you guys again for joining me today on day 7 of Cacao Talk, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.